Welcome, and thank you for joining me on the Path of the Seeker. Tonight, we are going to go over the symbolism of the Virgo full moon. And on the full moon is when we meditate. The full moon is the receptive part of the moon cycle. And whenever you place your mind upon something, such as symbols, you are meditating. This is also the part of the moon cycle to make offerings of gratitude. And so I invite you to join me in offering this candle as a form of gratitude to whatever form of divinity you believe in, or whatever name you prefer to call it. And so offering our thanks and gratitude for what this moon cycle brings and the opportunity to know the divinity through the symbols and the astrology just a little bit better, and therefore ourselves, as we are made in the image of the divine. And so to start off with this full moon chat and meditation, we're going to start off with the symbolism of the actual zodiac signs themselves. I approach astrology and the zodiac signs as archetypes more than personality types, as most astrologers do. I'm not really interested in the prophecy so much as the deep meaning of what the energies mean, and aligning myself with that energy in order to work with it instead of against it. And so we have a fascinating story happening with the Pisces moon cycle that we are in. And we are offering a brown candle. I forgot to cover that because Virgo is an earth sign and Virgo is all about results. But we'll get to that in just a moment. So we started off in Pisces, which is a water sign. Water is the process of materialization. Water goes from being water vapor to condensation to rain, and in some cases to ice. And so the direction of west on the medicine wheel and water represents literally the process of the disincarnate becoming incarnate in a lot of ways. Pisces, however, represents the ocean of oneness. And it is in this ocean of oneness that all of us exist until we incarnate. And Pisces is the final sign of the zodiac, the final sign of the completion of the story of the year. And it really depicts us returning to spirit. And obviously it is an ending energy. And the symbol is two fish swimming in opposite directions, tied by the tail to one another. And what's really fascinating is that we are now in a full moon in Virgo, and we find within the symbolism the Piscean fish, because Virgo actually represents the descent of spirit into the human body. In many myths, it is the sleeping goddess, the feminine aspect that needs to be awakened within all of us. And there are processes such as the alchemical marriage, where the divine feminine rises up from the root chakra through all the other chakras to the crown chakra, reconnecting with the divine, or the Kundalini awakening, which is the Shakti goddess energy rising up from the root chakra and going all the way up to the crown chakra. Both of those are a way of describing the awakening of the goddess within. And in the tarot, whenever you see a feminine, it is actually representative of the subconscious. And so when I drew my symbolism for Virgo, I chose to make her asleep to represent the sleeping goddess as she is represented in myth throughout the world. Matheson in the Ancient Worldwide System does a fantastic job of sharing all of the different myths, and there's hundreds of them, if not thousands, around the world, where Virgo, who sits at the point where the fall equinox is, represents the fall of man into the human body, the descent of man into the human body. And of course, that descends us into the fall and winter months, which are the bottom of the zodiac and the underworld. And so it's very interesting that we went from the Piscean fish to Virgo, which represents that animal body and one of the fish in the Piscean symbols. Now the next thing I want to talk about is actually the moon card. So I'm going to invite you to have a cup of tea with me if you like. And I have my tea here. I have a honey chai turmeric. And the reason why we're going to have chai is because the number 18 is the number of the Jewish word for chai, which means life. So let's look to see. I love yogi tea because it always has a little saying. And the saying that we got is, find your unity in your service to all. Pretty fun. So chai is obviously a tea, but it is the Jewish word for life or vitality. And in the moon card, there are 18 yods to represent this life force. And of course, as I explained before, this is the Pisces card. And it represents the entire path of the seeker. So Pisces being the final sign of the zodiac, it makes sense that we see the whole map of the path of the seeker. However, it is not the final card in the 7 cards of the tarot that depict the path, but it does show the entire path emerging from the ocean of oneness in a hard-shelled body, which is representative of the ego, passing through the mineral and the vegetative plant worlds and into the wild wolf or the domesticated dog. Domesticated dog representing the tamed mind, the wolf representing the untamed mind or untamed animal body. It is mostly ego. The 2 towers representing the ego itself, that mankind tends to build around itself because we see the world as a fierce and dark place. And then eventually the path winds upwards into the hills. And of course, we all know that it's climbing that mountain of achievement that all of us are going towards. Now, the Hebrew letter ascending to this is Kuf. And I have actually made a bigger one of those right here. And Kuf is representative in, according to Paul Foster Case and Jason Lauderhand, of the back of the head. And you can kind of see that the flame of the candle here looks like the back of the head. And all Hebrew letters are pretty much a candle with a flame of some sort. But this is very similar to the back of the head. And they relate it to the medulla oblongata, the part of us that's the animal self, the animal body. And they relate Pisces in general to sleep and to the regenerative nature of sleep, which is also interesting because, again, we have a Virgo full moon that is represented by the sleeping goddess. All of this seems to tie very much in together, right? And in Daniela Abravanel's book, who explains the Hebrew alphabet as well, it's the Secrets of the Hebrew Alphabet book, she explains that Kuf is connected to the holiday of Purim, which it is Purim today. Purim is a holiday where Jews are allowed to become inebriated in celebration of the Persian, I believe it was a king who was trying to kill them. And the Persian Jewish people survived. But on Purim, they become inebriated to learn to turn their tears into joy, according to Daniela Abravanel. I think that's a beautiful story, and very, considering all the existential crises I've seen recently during these transits, and this moon cycle in particular, I think that is a wonderful coincidence that on this full moon, it also happens to be Purim, and is a time to turn sorrow into joy and reminiscence. And so that is our Hebrew letter associated with this moon cycle. And again, the moon card is representative of Pisces. This is the Piscean tarot card, not the Virgo one. And hence why it would be associated with the current month. Or month, as it was originally determined by the moon before the Romans came and turned it into a solar calendar. So we'll move on to our astrology. And in the astrology, I noted it's mostly tense. This is a difficult full moon, but it's major healing and there's a finality. And sometimes there has to be a breakdown before there's breakthrough. In fact, I found most of the time it has to be a breakdown before breakthrough. And looking at this chart, our host of the moon is in Pisces, so a lot of Piscean energy. Of course, Neptune, the ruler of Pisces, has been in this sign for quite some time, but we also have the sun, which represents our consciousness, and Saturn is just on the edge of almost getting there. But we also have a lot of energy in Aries. We have Jupiter and Chiron, which are conjunct, and we have Venus and of course Eris, but we also have Hygeia and Vesta. Hygeia is all about hygiene, and Vesta is the hearth, and both of those are associated with the body, which is also interesting because we have Virgo, which is associated with the body as well, and being entombed more or less in the body. And some final thoughts on that is that we also have the actual moon is at 7 degrees of Virgo. And of course we have a Mars at square the sun and the moon, and that's where a lot of the tension comes from. Of course, the sun and Neptune are opposed by the moon, as they are. Sun's always opposed the moon during a full moon. That's how it becomes illuminated. But this is mostly red, as you can see, so it's a very tense chart. And a lot of people will be talking about Pluto being on the final degree and Saturn being at the final degree, which gives them a lot of weight. It's kind of like when you're getting out of a pool, you can't help but cause waves. And so a lot of people are talking about these two. But I really want to focus on this Aries energy and this Pisces energy, because Aries was the sign where the souls first rammed their way, the sign of the ram, into the human experience and physical material reality. And the fascinating thing about our symbols that I pulled is we received himself And we have here, this is algae. And the other symbol that I pulled for this full moon is my athame, which is made in the image of a antler. And all three of these, as you can tell, you have the antlers of himself, algae, which represents the elk, and it looks like antlers as well, and then our antler fancy lace agate athame. And antlers represent a connection to the higher self, to divinity, and it represents being connected. And as you can see, himself has his entire crown chakra lit up, and he also has his third eye and his heart. And so there's a very primal energy here, a very kind of first cause type of energy, and it really tells me that we're really deeply connected during this full moon to source. We can really ground into that energy and being connected, as long as we can keep in the body and remind ourselves that we're here. And that's why I used mostly grounding stones like jet, hypercynth, one of my favorites, garnet, which is also one of my favorites to work with. It's a very grounding stone. Black kyanite, it's also a cleansing stone. And then I have some black amber and another piece of amber here, which represents results. And then I included this one because it represents an ammonite, represents the spiral that all of us experience. We always come back to the same point. And I have here a Lumerian smoky quartz. It is also rutilated. It's a bit hard to see the rutilations in there. But all of these are very grounding stones. I also have several huge pieces of obsidian back here. And these are all grounding stones, because when we're connected this much to divinity, to the life force, to the chai of life, we have to ground it. It's like being struck by lightning. And right now, of course, we have Uranus in Taurus, along with the North Node, although thankfully they're no longer conjunct like they were last year. And so, for this full moon, the symbols point to being very connected to that life force. And so we need to ground into it. Sorry for the brief interruption. So, for this full moon, it's a very primal energy, but very connected to source energy, to that primal life energy within us. And it's when we can balance out both our egoic animal body with our divinity, with our soul self, that we can discover a lot of peace and a lot of understanding. And so we have a very psychic full moon occurring, but a very grounding one, which means that we'll actually see some results from this. And himself is also a very protective symbol. Of course, the 1 and the 7 equals 8. And once again, we have receptive energy, much as the 1 and 8 here, the 18 for the moon card. Of course, that adds up to 9, which is a number of finality. And the last thing that I wanted to cover in regards to symbols, you can hear my cat in the background there, is I pulled the card for copper, which is the metal associated with Venus. And copper is a very conductive element is the second most conductive. Silver is actually more conductive than copper. But again, we have a lot of receptivity, a lot of channeling energy here in this full moon. And the last thing I wanted to cover, because I was going to do a different video for it, but decided not to, is the Saturn ingressing into Aquarius, or into Pisces. So Saturn's going to be going into Pisces, and it's a bit like squaring the circle. In sacred geometry, the circle represents the divine feminine, the womb of potential, the void that is not quite so void. And it's that oneness, the absolute unbounded oneness. The square represents our ego, our ability to grasp concepts, the mind itself. It's pretty much your square on the checkerboard of life, or chessboard of life, whichever you choose. And squaring the circle is basically comprehending the absolute unbounded oneness with our mind, with our ability to go and pull an idea from that unity and bring it into this world. And that's basically what squaring the circle is. And Saturn is very much like the square. It is like a cake pan, and it gives the mind its form, and it is form itself. Saturn is also associated with the physical body and the reaping of the physical body. And Pisces is very much the absolute unbounded oneness, the circle. So Saturn ingressing into Pisces is very much the basically squaring the circle. So we will probably have some sort of comprehension and change with how we relate between the mind and the body during this. Sorry about that. Had a bit of an interruption. My cat decided to start talking as my husband went back upstairs. And so what I was saying is that on this full moon, what will probably, or this Saturn ingressing into Pisces, which happens the same day, a few hours, I believe, after the full moon. With Saturn ingressing into Pisces, we'll probably have a change between our comprehension of the mind and body and soul occurring. And in addition to that, my thoughts on Saturn entering Pisces, aside from squaring the circle, is that Pisces is also representative of groupthink. And Adam Ellenboss did a really great job at covering the different events that happened in 1994 to, can't remember what year it was, probably 1996, that Saturn was last in Pisces. And one of the things that he noted was that people who were divided, there were crossing overs, there were overtures between groups that occurred during the last Saturn and Pisces transit. I'll put a link to his video in the description box below. And so I think we will see that groupthink that has been very strong and created all the divisions. I think we're going to see a shift and a change in that groupthink while Saturn is in Pisces. And I'm very excited to have Saturn in Pisces as well, because that means that Saturn will no longer be in a sign that it rules. So we won't have that very strong authoritarian type energy occurring. And as our symbols suggest, we're very much protected during this time. And it should be very interesting, especially when Saturn and Neptune meet up. which won't be for, I think, like a year and a half or so. It'll be a while before that happens. But one last thing to offer you. I pulled this purpurite stone for the oracle stone for the actual day of the full moon. And purpurite is a stone of spiritual awakening and perception. And basically, to me, it looks a lot like the pubic bone, especially when I turn it this way. And so, in a lot of ways, I feel that we are going to have tomorrow a little bit of a birth of a new perception of spirituality. And I wanted to share that with you. So keep an eye out for tomorrow's daily oracle stone. Do a better job of explaining it then. As for now, that is all that I wanted to share with you. I could share a lot more, but I'm constricted by time. And so I wish you a wonderful full moon and a wonderful completion to this moon cycle. And thank you very much for joining me. Thank you for all the subscribers, all the likes. My channel is really doing well, and it's very awesome to see it growing. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And until next time. Bye-bye.